The Republic of Turkey marked its 100th anniversary on October 29, 2023. This significant date commemorated a century since the nation's founding, which directly followed the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire after more than 600 years of imperial rule, a period that saw its power peak in the mid-16th century, dominating vast lands across the Middle East, North Africa, and Eastern Europe. The Ottoman era formally concluded in 1923. The establishment of the modern Turkish Republic signaled a new chapter for the region, transforming it from a sprawling empire into an independent, sovereign state. The Ottoman Empire emerged from humble beginnings as a minor regional power in northwestern Anatolia. Yet, this nascent state quickly embarked on a period of remarkable territorial expansion. This growth wasn't just about conquering land. It was also fueled by rapid advancements in governmental, social, and economic systems. These sophisticated developments allowed the Ottomans to build one of the most diverse and prosperous empires in the world. Their innovative administrative structures and robust economic networks laid the groundwork for centuries of dominance, transforming them from an obscure principality into a formidable global force. The foundations of Ottoman history are deeply intertwined with the Great Migration of Turkic peoples from Eastern Asia. For centuries, these originally Asiatic groups gradually moved westward across the vast Eurasian steppe. By the 7th century, they had reached the Altai Mountains region, near what is now Russia, Kazakhstan, and Mongolia. Their journey continued southward and westward, eventually leading many to settle into a semi-nomadic lifestyle around the Caspian and Aral Seas. One of the most prominent Turkic tribes to inhabit this area was the Oghuz. In the late 10th century, a pivotal figure named Seljuk broke away from the main tribal group. He established his own dynasty, which, over the subsequent decades, laid the groundwork for the Seljuk Empire. This burgeoning power expanded significantly into Persia, where they were profoundly influenced by and soon adopted the Persian language and culture. Crucially, the Seljuks also converted to Islam, a faith that would become central to their identity and future expansion. By the 1060s, their influence had stretched to the borders of the Byzantine Empire in western Anatolia, setting the stage for future conflicts and the eventual rise of a new Turkic power. A pivotal moment arrived with the Battle of Manzikert in 1071, where the Seljuks inflicted a crushing defeat on the Byzantine army. This victory was instrumental, allowing them to gain effective control of the Near East and push deeper into what is now Turkey. However, over the subsequent 2 centuries, the Seljuk Empire gradually declined, fragmenting into a patchwork of smaller Turkic states. Despite this fragmentation, the Turkic peoples maintained a significant presence in Anatolia, notably through the Sultanate of Rum, setting the stage for future regional powers. It was amidst the fragmented Turkic principalities of northwestern Anatolia that a pivotal figure emerged: Osman. Though historical sources on his life and reign are limited, Osman is universally credited as the founder of the Ottoman dynasty. His leadership laid the groundwork for what would become a vast and enduring empire, setting the stage for centuries of expansion and influence across multiple continents. The century following Osman's reign was largely defined by the relentless Ottoman drive to conquer the last remnants of the once mighty Byzantine Empire. By the 14th century, the Byzantines, who had historically controlled much of the eastern Mediterranean, found their dominion drastically reduced. Their territory was confined to the southern Balkans, mainland Greece, the Greek islands, and a small foothold in what is now Turkey, with their empire governed from Constantinople. This city, renowned as the most formidable fortified urban center in the medieval world, had famously withstood countless sieges over centuries. For the Ottomans to truly expand beyond their northwestern Anatolian base, they understood that taking Constantinople was not merely a strategic objective, but an absolute necessity. A significant step towards this ultimate goal occurred in 1331 with the fall of the city of Nicaea to the Turks. Years later, in 1369, Adrianople, a city located just 200 kilometers from Constantinople, near the modern borders of Greece, Bulgaria, and Turkey, also succumbed to Ottoman forces. Adrianople even served as a temporary Ottoman capital, solidifying their presence in the region, followed by further conquests in Serbia and Bulgaria. Despite a brief period of internal turmoil within the Ottoman Empire during the early decades of the 15th century, the stage was set for the final act. In 1451, Mehmed II was restored to the Ottoman Sultanate, driven by an unwavering determination to conquer Constantinople once and for all. In early April 1453, he laid siege to the great city. The siege was a grueling affair, lasting for 7 intense weeks before the formidable walls were finally breached, allowing the Ottoman army to flood in. Pointedly, the last emperor of the Byzantines was Constantine XI, bearing the same name as Constantine I, the original founder of the city over 1,000 years prior, whose eponym had been bestowed upon it. Constantine XI valiantly fell in the fighting on May 29, 1453, and the city itself fell to the Ottomans later that same day. With its capture, Constantinople immediately became the new capital of the burgeoning Ottoman Empire. As a powerful symbolic statement of this monumental conquest, the magnificent cathedral of Hagia Sophia, originally built by Emperor Justinian over 900 years earlier, was reconsecrated as a mosque. The conquest of Constantinople and the fall of the Byzantine Empire marked merely the beginning of the Ottoman Empire's meteoric rise. In the century that followed this monumental victory, the Turks embarked on an ambitious course of unprecedented expansion and conquest. Their dominion rapidly spread across the eastern Mediterranean, Middle East, North Africa, and deep into the Balkans and the Black Sea region. Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople, wasted no time in extending the empire's reach. In the early 1460s, he swiftly overran Morea in Greece, the Empire of Trebizond in northern Turkey, and then Bosnia and the Balkans. By his death in 1481, his expansions included parts of southern and eastern Turkey, the conquest of Albania, and even an expedition to the Crimean Peninsula, establishing an Ottoman presence on the northern shores of the Black Sea. His successor, Bayezid II, proved equally formidable. During his 3-decade reign, he added new territories in Syria and the Levant after defeating the Mamluks of Egypt. He also consolidated Ottoman control over the Aegean Sea, successfully battling the Republic of Venice. Selim I, despite a shorter rule, 1512 to 1520, was instrumental in conquering virtually all of North Africa, decisively defeating the Mamluks at the Battle of Verdania in 1517 and bringing Egypt and much of Libya under Ottoman sway, while Algeria and Tunisia became vassals. This relentless drive for expansion solidified the Ottoman Empire as a dominant force. Under the nearly half-century reign of Suleiman the Magnificent, 1520 to 1566, the Ottoman Empire reached the zenith of its power. His leadership saw the empire achieve its greatest territorial expansion, firmly establishing it as one of the foremost global powers of its era. Much of the Ottoman Empire's unparalleled success and rapid expansion during its golden age can be directly attributed to the proficiency and advanced structure of its military. Unlike many of their contemporaries, the Ottomans fielded a cohesive and highly effective fighting force that brilliantly integrated well-trained infantry, formidable cavalry, and cutting-edge artillery. This balanced combination was largely unmatched during its heyday, giving them a significant advantage on the battlefield. Among their elite troops were the renowned Janissaries. These soldiers were unique, often recruited as child slaves from Christian lands in southwestern Europe, and then rigorously trained after being forced to convert to Islam. Incorporated into the Ottoman army under strict codes of discipline and professionalism, the Janissaries evolved into an exceptionally effective and feared fighting force, serving as a cornerstone of Ottoman military power. From this position of strength in the early 16th century, the Ottomans began to consolidate their efforts, dedicating the next 2 centuries to waging relentless war against Christendom across Western and Central Europe. This was a multi-pronged conflict, with much of the initial focus centered on gaining dominance of the Mediterranean Sea. Here, they frequently clashed with Spain, the preeminent naval power in the region at that time. Spain, controlling vast swathes of southern Italy and numerous Italian islands, took it upon themselves to check the advance of the Muslim Ottomans. For decades, massive armadas were sent back and forth between the two formidable powers, culminating in several major naval and land engagements that shaped the balance of power in the vital Mediterranean theater. Despite their formidable military, the Ottomans faced significant reversals that would ultimately temper their expansionist ambitions. In 1565, they launched the Great Siege of Malta, a grueling attempt to capture the island from the Knights of St. John, who had received it from the Spanish crown after losing Rhodes to the Turks decades prior. This pivotal siege ended in a decisive failure for the Ottomans, marking a crucial check to their naval dominance in the central Mediterranean. Just 6 years later, their advance in the Mediterranean was further halted by another formidable Spanish-led Christian alliance. In 1571, this alliance dispatched a massive armada, culminating in the Battle of Lepanto off the coast of northwestern Greece. Involving over 400 ships and 130,000 men, Lepanto resulted in another crushing defeat for the Ottomans. These naval setbacks, while not ending their power, demonstrated to the Christian powers that the Turkish threat could indeed be contained. From an Ottoman perspective, these defeats merely shifted their strategic focus to other European fronts. However, a far more significant turning point occurred on land. Although they had failed in earlier attempts, under Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha, a new siege was launched against the Austrian capital of Vienna in 1683. Despite fielding an army exceeding 150,000 men, the Ottomans could not take the city. When a Christian Holy League relief force, led by Polish King John III Sobieski, arrived on September 12th, they decisively routed the Ottomans in what was history's largest cavalry charge. The defeat at Vienna in 1683 irrevocably marked the turning point for Ottoman advance into Europe, after which they would gain virtually no further ground on the continent. As the late 17th century bled into the early 18th, the Ottoman Empire entered a period of slow stagnation and relative decline. Much of this downturn stemmed from the complacency of the sultans during this era. Over time, they gradually adopted a more hands-off approach to governing their vast empire. While the Ottoman system, headquartered at the Topkapi Palace in Constantinople, had historically seen active and engaged sultans directly involved in imperial affairs, particularly in the 15th and 16th centuries, this changed significantly. With each passing generation, day-to-day decision-making increasingly fell to the Grand Vizier, who acted as prime minister, supported by a growing army of officials and administrators. Meanwhile, the sultans themselves spent more of their time in their harems and gardens, detached from the direct oversight of the empire's complex machinery. The empire's governance was also largely decentralized, while taxes were diligently collected from the provinces to maintain a formidable army. The regions themselves enjoyed a fair degree of autonomy under local rulers and governors. Historically, the Ottoman Empire was remarkably tolerant. While converting to Islam offered clear advantages for those seeking to climb the social hierarchy, it was by no means mandatory. Christians and other religious adherents were widely accepted under Ottoman rule. In fact, the empire became a primary haven for Europe's Jews, who often faced severe persecution and expulsion from countries like Spain during this era. Cities such as Thessaloniki flourished as centers of religious cosmopolitanism in the early modern period, with a significant Jewish majority by as early as 1519. Initially, the Ottoman Empire was also immensely wealthy. It boasted extensive trade networks that stretched from distant India and China along the fabled Silk Road. These routes channeled goods through bustling cities like Constantinople, Alexandria in Egypt, and Antioch and Damascus in the Levant. However, the tide of global economic activity began to turn. Over time, the center of world trade shifted dramatically from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic. The advent of large, ocean-going vessels, carrying lucrative trade from the Americas and the Far East, effectively bypassed the Ottomans. This reduced Europe's reliance on the overland trade routes that traversed Ottoman territory, rendering them increasingly obsolete. This economic stagnation, coupled with the internal imperial decline, meant the Ottoman Empire began to fall critically behind its European rivals. These European nations were, at the same time, undergoing a profound scientific revolution, marked by rapid advancements in technology and developments on all fronts. Further, as the 18th century gave way to the 19th, the precarious situation for the Ottomans dramatically worsened, leading to the empire being infamously dubbed the sick man of Europe. This grim moniker reflected its advanced state of decline and vulnerability to external powers and internal dissent. As early as 1804, an uprising in Serbia immediately challenged Ottoman control over the Balkans, a region that would become a constant source of instability. The empire's steady fracturing continued relentlessly in the subsequent decades. The Greek War of Independence, erupting in 1821, stands as a prime example. This conflict ultimately led to the emergence of an independent Greek state by 1829, a new nation that received crucial economic and military support from Great Britain, France, and Russia. These European powers were eager to see the Ottoman presence in the region diminish, each for their own strategic benefit. A year later, the nominal Ottoman hold on Algeria was entirely severed when France invaded and began establishing its own colony there. Throughout the 19th century, particularly during the 1850s, Russia consistently sought to expedite the Ottoman Empire's collapse by advancing into their territories around the Black Sea. However, unlike previous instances where Western Christian powers might have capitalized on such an opportunity, Britain and France did not wish to see the Ottoman Empire collapse entirely. Their primary concern was to preserve the balance of power in Europe, preventing any single nation from controlling too much territory or exerting undue influence. Consequently, they joined the conflict in defense of the Ottoman Empire, resulting in the Crimean War. This war, fought with some success, provided much-needed, though temporary, respite to the declining Ottoman power. Nevertheless, the 1860s, 1870s, and 1880s saw the continuous emergence of numerous new countries from the Ottoman provinces in the Balkans. Romania and Serbia declared themselves independent, and Bulgaria gained increasing autonomy. The Austro-Hungarian Empire and Russia persistently continued their attacks at the expense of the Ottomans in the Balkans and the Caucasus. By the early 1910s, with Italy seizing Libya and Albania establishing independence, European powers openly discussed dissecting what remained of the Ottoman Empire, dividing it among themselves. This seemingly never-ending period of decline spurred growing concerns among the Ottoman Empire's younger generations. Many of them, identifying as Turkish nationalists, called for radical political reforms to mitigate the empire's downturn and hopefully rejuvenate its prospects after 2 centuries of stagnation. At the forefront of this burgeoning movement were the Young Turks. This diverse group sought to replace the centuries-old governmental system of an absolute sultan and his ministers with a modern constitutional monarchy, accompanied by a Western-style parliament and a reformed civil service. In 1908, they successfully launched a revolution, ushering in a period of constitutional government. However, the Young Turks were a loosely formed alliance of various political factions. The ultimate end for the Ottoman Empire would come from both within and without, inextricably linked to the outbreak of World War I. Up until this point, the Turks had largely avoided involvement in the 2 main military alliances that had developed among the European great powers: the Triple Entente, France, Russia, and Britain, and the Triple Alliance, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. However, when conflict finally erupted in the summer of 1914, the Turks saw a strategic opportunity. They aimed to push back against the Russian advancements made over the past century, and thus decided to join Germany, alongside Austria-Hungary, as part of the Central Powers. The Ottomans had mixed fortunes during the war. On one hand, they scored a major victory against the British and Anzac forces during the ill-judged Gallipoli campaign. But in the Middle East and the Levant, they lost much of their territory to the Arab Revolt of 1916 to 1918, instigated by the British adventurer T. Lawrence, better known as Lawrence of Arabia. There was also a much darker and brutal aspect to Ottoman activities during the war. From 1915 onwards, the government engaged in acts of genocide against its Armenian subjects, resulting in the deaths of an estimated 1.5 million people. Overall, the war was a disaster for the Turks. Like Germany and Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire simply couldn't maintain the war effort, and by 1918, the Turkish military was in collapse across numerous fronts. With the end of World War I in late 1918, the victorious allies, Britain, France, Greece, and Italy, who had switched sides in 1916, occupied much of Turkey and began contemplating its post-war future. The Ottomans' last remaining territorial possessions in the Levant and the Middle East were divided up by Britain and France, who occupied them as imperial mandates. The Ottoman state was thus restricted largely to what is now Turkey itself, but even its territorial integrity was soon threatened by the claims of Greece and Italy. The former sought to annex lands its people once occupied as far back as Byzantine and ancient Greek times. while the latter sought control of islands like Rhodes as compensation for its wartime role. All of this culminated in a revolt against the Allied occupation of Turkey in May 1919. The Turkish War of Independence, as it became known, would last for 4 years and ultimately result in the emergence of the modern Turkish state and the subsequent terminus of the Ottoman Empire. In the early stages of the war, the remnants of the Ottoman government in Constantinople sided with the Allies in an effort to preserve what little of their empire remained. Their opponents, the Turkish nationalists, now led by the former Ottoman General Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, occupied much of the country's center and initially experienced extensive military losses against Greek and other Allied forces campaigning far inland. However, in the course of 1921 and 1922, the Turkish nationalists ardently fought back, gradually pushing the Greeks and others out of mainland Turkey and effectively securing a favorable armistice in October 1922. The following year, under Ataturk's decisive leadership, the Grand National Assembly in Ankara was recognized as the legitimate Turkish government with the signing of the Treaty of Lausanne. This treaty ratified the independence of the modern Republic of Turkey, officially ending the war and transferring the capital city from Constantinople to Ankara. With the ratification of the Treaty of Lausanne and the establishment of the Republic of Turkey, the Ottoman Empire, which had dominated much of the Middle East, North Africa, and parts of Eastern Europe for well over 600 years, was formally abolished and ceased to exist in 1923. This marked the dramatic conclusion of a vast historical era and the beginning of a new national identity for the Turkish people.